Bibles, turn to Proverbs. Doesn't matter where, it's all good. I was going through, we had to move a bunch of boxes quickly this week because of water. And so I started moving a bunch of stuff out of storage. And of all the things for me to find, I found a notebook of lessons out of Proverbs that I had written years ago. And interesting that would be the case after I'm already close to chapter 23 in our study. And let me get over here. Proverbs chapter 23. And stand with me if you would. I'm going to begin reading in verse number 22. Proverbs chapter 23 and verse number 22. Verse 22, and the Bible says, hearken unto thy father, and that begat thee, and despise not thy mother when she is old. Buy the truth, and sell it not. Also wisdom, and instruction, and understanding. The father of the righteous shall greatly rejoice, and he that begetteth a wise child shall have joy of him. Thy father and thy mother shall be glad, and she that bare thee shall rejoice. My son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. For a whore is a deep ditch, and a strange woman is a narrow pit. She that lieth in wait as for prey, and increaseth the transgressors among men. And I'm going to leave off reading right there. Father, I pray you bless the reading of your word. Use it for your honor and glory. And I pray these things in thy name. Amen. As Solomon was giving this instruction, thank you, may be seated. As Solomon was giving this instruction to his son, this is Solomon, and he is speaking these words to his son, and he's warning him about whorish women and the trap that is there. But he makes a statement here, and personally I think it's rather ironic that Solomon made this statement. And I've made this statement to my children. I have this underlined in my Bible. I want to bring your attention to verse number 26, and I want to teach you a principle out of it. The principle is in verse 26, but only in one application. He says here in verse 26, my son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. Now, if I had a room full of just dads, I would go in one direction with this message, but I don't. Suffice it to say that that is its primary application is to a son to do two things. Number one, give their heart to their parent, to give them their heart. If I have someone's heart, they will. That means I have their trust, and if I have their trust, that means I can direct them and guide them, and they'll take it because they trust me. Trust is a major issue, and that's what the passage is saying. Give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. Now that verse right there is a real scary verse for a parent. Because I want you to notice that there is something that goes with giving the heart. Now, Solomon is about to give his son some instruction, and he wants his son to listen. He wants his son to take care to the warning that he's giving them here. But there's two things going on here. There's Solomon's words, and then he says, observe my ways. And I want to speak to you tonight a little bit about words and ways, because you have one that goes with the other. I learned a lot by what my dad told me. I learned more by what my dad showed me. I learned more by what I saw in my dad than the words that he spoke. And I believe that one of the things that I was blessed with was with a dad whose ways and words matched. His words and his ways matched. He did not tell me to be honest and work hard and him turn around and be lazy and crooked. See, I watched him. I listened to him because I'd seen enough to know I could trust him. And I listened to him, and I observed his ways. My dad used to do things to me. It was really funny. Back before there was GPS and all this, I was probably 9 or 10 years old. I was about 10 or 11. I took a paper route, and I was throwing the Carrollton Chronicle. And that was back when the paper got thrown on your front porch, you know. I don't know, do they even do that anymore? I don't even know if they throw papers anymore, but I had a paper route, and I went up and down the neighborhood every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. I got up and I was throwing paper. Now, and I had to go to all those houses and collect the payment for those papers. I couldn't just, they didn't mail it in back then. You had to go collect, and it was cash. And so I would go and I would collect the cash. And I remember one Saturday morning, I'm looking at the paper that's instructing me, go get the cash together, document it. I had a little manila envelope for every customer. I wish I still had some of this stuff. It would be a great collector's item. And you would write their name and address on it and how much they paid you, how much they owed and how much they paid. And there would be that much cash in it. There better be that much cash in it. And what they would do is they would add that up, and then they would pay me a percentage of they would pay me a percentage or X number of dollars per, customer or whatever. And that's how I would get paid. And I'm looking at the instruction, and it says, bring to this address on Distribution, I'll never forget the name of the street, Distribution Boulevard. So I found out where Distribution Boulevard was. And I called the guy, and I got instructions and kind of made myself a little map and all that. I did all that on my own. And I go to my dad, and I say, hey, Dad, can you take me up there? I'm 12. I didn't drive yet. Which was a good thing. And I go up there, and my dad says, well, where are we going? I said, we're going to 4912 Distribution Boulevard. He said, where is it? I said, well, I've got and so he said, tell me how to get there. So I was looking at it, and I said, okay, you'll turn here, just go up Josie Lane to Valwood. So we went up out Josie Lane. I said, now turn right on Valwood. I said, now there's another street down here. We turn on, I think it was B Street. We turned on B Street. Turn left on B Street. So he turns left on B Street, and he says, okay, Distribution should be the next one on the left. And we go up in there, and sure enough, there it is and everything. It's kind of a warehouse, kind of an industrial district. And we went up in there. He said, you done real good, son. Done real good getting me over here on Distribution. I said, thanks. He said, yeah, I used to deliver right there. When I was driving a truck for Ryerson, I used to deliver that warehouse over there. I said, you knew where we were going? He said, yeah. He said, I wanted you to be able to give me instructions. I wanted to see if you could give instructions on how to get me here. He made me get the instructions. He knew where we were going all along. But he made me get the instructions. He made me do all that. What was he doing? He was trying to teach me a lesson, and I learned the lesson, and I was real impressed with him that he did that. I was always impressed with him that he made me learn how to do that. Now I just Google it. But back then, there was no Google. But the thing is, I learned how to do that, not because he told me how to do it. I learned by watching him. But the thing that I could say about him is that his words, the advice he gave me, matched his ways. The way he behaved. He told me how to be a good man, and then he was a good man in front of me. He told me how to be honest, and then he told the truth in front of me. I watched him with other people. He told me to behave myself and be a good man, and I watched him be a faithful husband. I watched him treat my mother with respect and dignity, and always treat her like a lady, and always treated her like number one. They had their fights, they had their problems, just like any married couple does. But I watched him handle life. And I learned as much because his words matched his ways. If we are going to claim to be God's people, there's some things that need to match in our lives. I'm going to broaden this beyond just being a parent. There are some things that have to match. Number one, our words have to match our ways. Give me thine heart and let thine eyes observe my ways. There are two parts to you giving Jesus to anybody. On your part. The Holy Spirit has to do his part. But there's two things that are involved. You'll hear these words, your witness and your testimony. Say, wait a minute, that sounds like your testimony is what you speak. Your witness is what people see in you, is see what you live. I hear you speak Christian. I hear you use the Christian words. I hear you use Christian dialect. I hear you talking about church. I hear you talking about the Lord. I hear you talking about the Bible. But how do I see you live? Do I see you live that way? Does your other language when you're not talking about the Lord match what you're saying when you're talking about the Lord? Does your Monday afternoon look like Sunday morning? That's a good way to ask yourself. If you're ever wondering about how you're behaving, would I behave this way on Sunday morning? Would I behave this way? Would I say that in front of a church crowd? Would I talk that way in front of a church crowd? Would I behave that way? There was a young man who is an evangelical Christian. He's a chaplain for the police department, one of the chaplains. He was an associate pastor at one church, now an associate pastor at a different church, but he's still one of the chaplains. And, he is so ready to give me spiritual advice. We had a picnic. We were invited, the chaplains were invited to a picnic. It was all police officers and their families. Lieutenant Piazza, our officer, our liaison, our police liaison officer, he's a liaison to the chaplain corps, invited us so that we could get to know the officers, get to know their families, get to see them with their families and all this. And this gentleman was there. Now, it's one thing when I see the chaplain who is a Catholic priest and I see him drinking liquor. I kind of expect that because he's a Catholic and they don't have a problem with drinking liquor. But when I see a guy who claims to be a New Testament evangelical Christian, raised a Baptist, by the way, and he's there with his wife, and they're hobnobbing, and we're hobnobbing, and all that, and I look over, he's got a beer can in his hand. I'm thinking, you're an assistant pastor in a church. What are you doing with a beer can in your hand? I got a real problem. You know what? I don't care to hear anything else that man has to say about the Lord. And I'm a pastor. How do the lost men that see that, how do they feel? And, one comment was made, and one of my other dear friends who is a chaplain also, he's also a chaplain, and he's also an assistant pastor, and he's the guy that helped me set up the sound system back here, Alex Sierra. He's a dear friend of mine, a good Christian man. And the subject came up, somebody asked him about that. And he said, hey man, this body's the temple. I'm not going to drink. This body's the temple of the Holy Spirit. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to put that in my body. But beyond that, do your words match your ways? Number two, do your values match your choices? Do your values match your choices? If I set a certain moral standard for myself, am I making choices that line up with those standards? Again, when you have someone making choices like that, when you have do your values line up with your choices? Earlier this week, I think it was over this weekend, in North Texas, in my neck of the woods, in North Texas, just north of Dallas, between Dallas and Fort Worth, at a big, major, fancy hotel that's there in the Dallas area, close to the airport, there was a sting operation. A sex sting operation. A prostitution ring got busted up, and 46 Johns were arrested. Some of them were arrested for having sex with minors. One of them, and this is not gossip because it's in the front page of the news, so I'm not repeating anything that hasn't been reported already in the news. One of them arrested was a varsity football coach from Louisville High School. My sister lives in Louisville, Texas. It's bigger than Davenport, but a high school football coach. One of them was from a town north of there called Frisco. He was a youth pastor, busted in a prostitution sting operation. Now, you get up as a pastor, as a youth pastor, you claim to be a man of God. Do your principles match, do your principles match your, the values, excuse me, do your values match your choices? Do your values match your choices? Well, I'm trusting God for my provision until He doesn't provide, and then I'm going to run to the bank. I'm trusting God. I think you ought to trust God. I think you ought to believe that God's going to supply your needs. And we go head over heels in debt for stuff that we don't really need. We ought to live by, have a certain set of moral values. Add to your faith virtue, the Bible says, and to your virtue knowledge, and to your knowledge temperance. Those things are in order, by the way. You add to your faith virtue. Virtue is moral character. And add to your virtue knowledge. Why do you add virtue before you add knowledge? Because knowledge without virtue is arrogance. As one missionary's wife told a group of ladies, and I like that, so I'll give her credit for it. Then you add the knowledge, and then you add the temperance. Why temperance is personal self-control. Why do you add that? Why did Peter say that you add that next? Because when I have the knowledge, I'm responsible for the knowledge, and so I have to have self-control so I can act according to what I've learned. Because my values need to match my choices. My words need to match my ways. My values need to match my choices. My principles need to match my practice. My principles need to match my practice. I think we ought to live by principles. That was a word that was used when I was in college, and I really didn't understand what they meant by it then. Honestly, it's strange that you can get to your third year in college and not really know what they mean by being principled, or by, I thought that was the guy that ran the school, was the principal. But that was a different kind of principle. But to live by principles, these are moral rules that we live by. And if I say that I have a certain principle, that this is true and this is the way it ought to be, but my practice doesn't line up with the principle, it's going to destroy my witness. It's going to destroy my testimony. My words have to match my ways. My values have to match my choices. My principles need to match my practice. My desires need to match my effort. My desires need to match my effort. Maybe I should put that differently and say my effort needs to match my desires. I can desire something all day long, but if I'm not willing to work for it, it's a dream. I heard somebody say one time, the difference between a dream and a goal is a plan. And you can have all the dreams. You can want something. I was watching one of those shows. I'm confessing my sin now. I was watching something on the Food Network. It was one of those food competitions. And this guy was talking to the judges. And the judges, he said, this competition, I want this more than anything in the world. I really want this really bad. Well, why should we give it to you? Well, I want it really bad. You don't get things because you want them really bad. There's a lot of things I might want really bad. There's some things I'd love to have that I will never have. Why? Because I'm not going to put forth the effort to get them. You know what I'd love to have? I'd love to have a Martin D38 guitar. Martin D38 guitar. I'd love to have one of those. Now, that guitar right there is over 50 years old. It is a fine instrument. I could never afford an instrument like that. That guitar, in its condition, at its age, and by the way, high-end guitars get more expensive the older they get. The guitar I'm talking about that I would want would run me between $3,500 and $4,500. You know why I'm never going to have it? Unless somebody gives me one. You know why I'm never going to have it? Because I ain't going to work that hard to spend that much money on a guitar that I don't need. When I have an excellent instrument over here that's worth close to $1,000 in its condition right now, it's worth a lot of money. My sister gave it to me because she bought one that's worth more money than that one. She gave me the Jim Croce model, and she's got the Glenn Campbell guitar, hers is called an Adamus. That's called a balladeer. And I'm giving you all kinds of useless information here, but I don't want to lose my point in the illustration. If I want something, I have to put forth the effort to have it. I want a good relationship with my wife, so she better get in line. No, that's going to take some effort on my part. I want to build this church. I want to see this church grow. I want to see this church prosper. And I better get ready to work. My pastor gave me he preached to me a message when I was ordained into the ministry. He preached my charge, and the one thing he pointed out is the title of that message was "The Man That God Uses." And among those points is the man that God uses is a man that is willing to work. And if he's not willing to work, he will not have it. The effort has to match the goal. You don't have the desire without the effort. Now, if you don't want anything, don't try. If you want something great, you're going to have to put forth a great effort. If you want something mediocre, if you want a mediocre life, put forth a mediocre effort, and that's what you'll get. You get in. There was a computer phrase way back in the 80s when they were just building computers. Back when a computer that filled this room could do less than what this computer does. Do you realize that this thing has more computer power than the lunar module? Yeah, this has more computer ability. This phone has more ability than the lunar module. Now, it can't take me to the moon, but it can. I ask it questions and it can answer. I can FaceTime. The Jetsons predicted the future. I mean, we have everything there. We got floating cars, and we got FaceTime and all that stuff that they had. We have all that. We have a whole lot of things that the science fiction. It was science fiction in 1950, and now it's science fact. Further than we ever imagined. But if I have a desire, I'm going to have to match it with the effort. That old guy says, hey, I want this more than anything. I love what the guy said. I love the response of the judge. He said, you know, you can dream of having this, but he said that very phrase, a dream. He said a dream. The difference between a dream and a goal is a plan. You can dream all day long, but until you put a plan to that dream, you will never reach a goal. You will never reach a goal. Words have to match our ways. Our values have to match our choices. Our principles have to match our practice. Our desires have to match our efforts, our belief. And this is the bottom line that really covers all of it. Our belief has to match our practice. What we believe. What we believe. There was a great court battle in Texas back in the 80s. Pastors were being thrown in jail for having Christian schools. One of them was a pastor in Garland, Texas. His name was Earl Little. Earl Little did not go to jail because he was a criminal or he stole money or anything like that. Earl Little went to jail because he had it. This is in Texas, folks. He had a Christian school that refused to take a state license. And they said, you can't have a school without a state license. He said, God gave us these kids, the state didn't. God gave us these kids. They're not the state's kids, they're our kids. We're going to raise them the way we want to. And he said, go ahead, give them any standardized test you want. They'll blow your public school kids away. And they did. They did. I mean, private schools, parochial schools, the standard of achievement of those students, the academic level of those students was always far and away ahead of the public school kids, especially back then. Public schools, when I was growing up, quite frankly, they were kind of mediocre at best. I had one of the best schools in the area, and it was kind of mediocre. But Earl Little went to prison. He went to jail because he refused to take a license for his school. Because, you see, it was illegal And they fought that battle, and born out of that battle was an organization known as the Christian Law Association, formed by Dr. David Gibbs II. And he has done a great job of fighting for the rights of churches ever since. He is a legal missionary. And they fought court battle, and the standard that was set at the time, and they were asking Earl Little these questions about the school, and they said, look, they said, do you charge for your Sunday school? He said, no, we don't charge for our Sunday school. He said, but you charge for your Christian school. He said, yes, we charge for our Christian school because those parents are hiring teachers to work under the auspices of our Christian school. Those teachers work for the parents, and they pay in order to help pay. They buy the curriculum that we teach them. And they ask him a lot of questions like that. What do you do on Sunday that's different from what they do on Monday? And the judge said to him, Mr. Little, and I'm quoting, Mr. Little, I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be consistent. Now, Dr. Little won that battle. At great expense to him and his church. They won that battle, and they won it for, they set a national precedent that the parents had a right, the parents had the final say in the education of their children, and not the state, because they had the court getting up. Look, a lawyer should not stand up in a court in Texas and tell parents that they don't control their children, that they are the property of the state. Those were the words he used. But you know what the judge wanted to see? You know why they won that? They won that because their beliefs matched their practices. And the lawyer said, Mr. Little, look, you can believe anything you want to. And the former Attorney General of the state of Texas, who was later elected governor, who threw Lester Roloff in jail and for not taking a license on his children's homes, he ended up destroying his political career. You don't stand against God's man for very long and prosper. And Mark White didn't. But what Mark White had come out and said is, you can believe anything you want to, but we get to tell you what your practice is. His words. You can believe anything you want to, but we tell you what to practice. And the state of Texas said, no, you don't. Can you imagine what these guys back then would think if they heard Beto O'Rourke get up and say, I'm running for the governor of Texas and I'm going to make guns illegal? I'm going to run for the mayor of San Francisco and make homosexuality a capital crime. That'd get you elected in San Francisco, you think? Yeah, it didn't get him elected either. Two times he's gotten slaughtered in the polls in Texas, running on, I'm going to let all the immigrants in and I'm going to take away your guns. And he said, blankety blank, yes, I'm coming after your guns. And Texans said, blankety blank, no, you're not. Didn't approve of their language. But you see, the idea that, hey, you can believe anything you want, but just don't practice it. That doesn't work for a Christian. If I believe it, I should practice it. And by the way, if I say I believe it on Sunday, I need to be practicing it on Monday. If I say I believe it in church, I need to practice it out there. I need to practice it. If I say I believe it in the pulpit, I need to practice it at home. You see. My son, give me thine heart, and let thine eyes observe my ways. My words have to match my ways. My principles have to match my practice. My desires have to match my efforts. Ultimately, my belief has to match my practice. My belief has to match my practice. Otherwise, it's not a belief, is it? Somebody said to Dr. Jack Hiles, pastor of First Baptist Hammond, he said, I used to believe like you do, and I don't believe that way anymore. He said, I've changed my position. And Dr. Hiles said, change is a position. My position is I change. Whichever way the wind's blowing, whichever way's popular, whichever way's easy. I'll do this until it's hard, and when it becomes hard, I'm going to stop doing it. Oh, well, then your desire doesn't match your effort. You just don't want it that bad. It's like I was talking to Brian, getting out there 10 degrees on 3 feet of ice and drilling a hole in it. You know why I don't do that? You know why I wait until it's warmer to go fishing? I go ice fishing in July when all the ice is melted. It's a lot easier to get through that ice, and I can do it in a t-shirt, and I don't have to have a tent around me to survive. You know why I don't do that? Because I don't want fish that bad. I'm not that hungry for a fish. If I were starving and couldn't eat, then I might. But I just don't. I love to fish. I love taking my boys fishing. We'll go fishing when it gets warmer. I ain't getting out on that ice. Why? I don't want it that bad. One millionaire that I know, I haven't known many millionaires, but I had a millionaire tell me one time. He said, anything worth having is worth working hard for, but not everything that you have to work hard for is worth having. You have to decide, does the goal, does the desire match the effort? Or does the effort match the desire? Do your beliefs match your practices? See, our words have to match our ways. Let's all stand. Let your words match your ways. Johnny Cash became a Christian about halfway through his life, and he lived it as best he could after that. And on his tombstone is a verse from Psalm 19. Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. The words of my mouth. Say, preacher, God spoke to my heart today through the message. Would you pray for me? Just slip your hand up. Preacher, pray for me. Thank you. We're going to have a couple of verses of invitation. If the Lord's dealing with your heart tonight, you come. The altars are open. You come. Father, I pray you'd bless this invitation. I pray you'd use it for your honor and glory, and I pray these things in thy name. Amen. As the music plays, the altar's open. You come.